Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Hong Kong IE Civil Division's event, technical webinar on transitioning to a sustainable transportation system in a metropolitan context, organized by the Hong Kong IE Civil Division and Polytechnic University. I'm MC up to today. We are honored to have Dr. Wang, who is currently an assistant professor at the Civil and Environmental Engineering Department at PolyU. Previously, Anne worked as a postdoctoral researcher at the San Diego City Lab, MIT. Before MIT, he earned his doctoral from the University of Toronto in 2020 and his master's degree from McGill University in 2016. His interdisciplinary research focused on the nexus of sustainable transportation systems, urban environmental sensing, and data-driven modeling techniques. His recent work explores urban sustainability issues in a metropolitan context. His research has been featured in multiple high-impact journals, including Atmospheric Environment, Environmental Science and Technology, and Applied Energy. Without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. N. Wang to deliver the talk. Dr. N. Wang, please.
Thank you for the introduction. It is an honor and a pleasure to be invited by HKIE to present my study on sustainable transportation. So as I just being introduced, I'm currently an assistant professor at PolyU. So my major research area is about sustainable transportation and also mobile sensing of the urban environment. So before I get into my real topic, I would really like to share with all of you that like our Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering. So our department is has a lot of achievements in recent years. We have 28 CEE scholars as ranked world's top 2 scientists, and our rankings among all types of university rankings and subject rankings are in total are #1 in Hong Kong and top listed across the globe. And also our achievement includes research excellence. We have acquired a bunch of highly prestigious research funding, including the theme-based research scheme. So Professor Ni Qing acquired the theme-based research funding in 2023 to 2024, and Professor Li Xiangdong in 2022 to 2023, and also our president, Professor Tong Jingguang in 2018 and 2019, and Professor Wang Tao in 2017 and 2018. We also received a Green Tech Fund by Professor Hun Chi-sun, who is currently our department head, and also Professor Hun Chi-sun received 2 Green Tech Funds in total. We have also acquired the RGC Collaborative Research Fund with PolyU being the principal, the project coordinator, and also the RGC Research Impact Fund in the past few years. We have a bunch of academic programs that covers every aspect of civil and environmental engineering, including 1 undergrad program in Bachelor of Engineering in Civil Engineering and Sustainable Development, Master of Science in Civil Engineering, and Master of Science in Environmental Management and Engineering. We also have like a research postgraduate program in Master of Philosophy and the Philosophy of Doctor of Philosophy. Our department has a glorious history. A few of our alumni I listed here that are highly achieved in their own career. So our department has abundant research resources and facilities that can be used by all the faculty members as well as the research students. They're also open for for teaching purposes, so our student can get first-hand experience in civil and environmental engineering. If you want to learn more about PolyU CE department, please don't hesitate to check out our website and sign up to our newsletter. And also don't forget to follow up our social media channels. And also I'm very happy to answer you any questions, not only related to my research, but also related to our department. Thank you. Without further ado, I will just go into my presentation regarding transitioning to a sustainable transportation system in a metropolitan context. But before we jump into the real boring research, I would like to share some of my ideas about what is sustainability. We talk about sustainability a lot. We want sustainable city, we want sustainable transportation, but what is sustainability? So in my opinion, there are three major components of a sustainable system, no matter it's about the city itself or it's about a country or at a regional level. So basically, these three components, they are interconnected and self-contained. Of course, the environmental sustainability serves as the center pillar in the climate changing world. And also there should be economic sustainability to ensure that the development of the system, communities or individuals is long-lasting and have the resilience to external disruptions and can sustain itself even without external economic support. And the societal component of sustainability often get neglected. It means that we should share the fruits of environmental improvement and the economic development equitably to all participants in the system rather than just a few. So my research currently mainly focused on the environmental sustainability as well as the societal sustainability. To outline today's seminar, I'm going to discuss first the deterministic emission inventory in the metropolis. This is mainly about the transportation system, if I may repeat that, and also about the stochastic emission inventory of a transportation system. And lastly, I will discuss about the environmental, societal, and health implications. Basically, how can we make use of these emission inventories to make a bigger impact and to assist data-driven policy making? So why do we want a sustainable transportation system? There are two main reasons. For one, traffic-related air pollution is a major health threat across the globe, especially Middle East and North America and the East Asia countries. The situation is even worse in the dense metropolitan areas as they have much higher traffic volume and also they have much higher population density. One example is Hong Kong. Moreover, in developed regions, transportation is a major source of greenhouse gas emissions, second only to oil and the gas industry. So on the right, I'm showing the share of transportation carbon dioxide emissions in the context of North America. So in the climate change world, all major metropolitan areas seek to lead the way to meet the challenging net zero carbon emission target, mostly by 2050, including Hong Kong on the left, and London, Paris, and New York, etc. All cities have mapped out ambitious plans with the decarbonization of transportation system as an indispensable milestone. This is not because that the transportation system itself it is a big greenhouse gas emission source, but also because it links and moves all other urban systems. So successful decarbonization of the transportation system will also facilitate other urban systems reaching the net zero target. However, unlike air pollution emissions, greenhouse gas emissions happen at every stage of fuel supply, fuel transportation, fuel refinery, and fuel consumption. All of these greenhouse gas emissions, they affect the global climate change. So that is to say the greenhouse gas emissions in the upstream induced by a city's fossil fuel consumption should also be accounted towards a city's emission inventory. However, the life cycle perspective of transportation greenhouse gas emissions has not been widely adopted in policymaking. Here I would jump into our first study, which is a study I done during my PhD in my PhD thesis, where I explored the emission inventory in the Greater Toronto and Hamilton area. It is the largest metropolitan area in Canada and the fourth largest in North America. It has a residence of 4.8 million people in the 2016 census. So with a similar population, the Greater Toronto area is 10 times bigger in terms of a land land area than Hong Kong. So you can imagine driving being the main travel mode in the region. So for this emission inventory, we accounted for the upstream emissions, which is also called the well-to-tank emissions. So they come from oil extraction, transportation, and the refining. And for electric vehicles, it comes from power and the electricity generation. And we also account for the operation emissions, which are referred to the tank-to-wheel emissions. They're basically their tailpipe emissions from conventionally fueled vehicles, which is zero for electric vehicles. So vehicle activity is obtained from a locally developed and calibrated traffic assignment model, and we couple these emission vectors and the vehicle activities to model the fuel cycle emissions. So we estimate that across the Greater Toronto area, the average fuel cycle greenhouse gas intensity across all trips is around 210 gram per kilometer, which is about which is only 20% less than that of driving. So this figure shows the range of the greenhouse gas emissions intensity in gram per kilometer for all passenger transportation modes, including from top to bottom, subway, streetcar, electric car, commuter train, transit bus, and driving. So because the most people in this area, they travel using household vehicles, so the average fuel cycle greenhouse intensity across all trips is very, very similar to that of driving. And also public transit mode has much lower emission intensity, but bigger ranges, as you can see here, for the GO train, which is the commuter train, and the transit bus, which are mostly in diesel. This is because the transit occupancy for these transit modes are not very stable throughout the day. So the regional fuel cycle greenhouse gas inventory for all passenger transportation is estimated at 36,000 tons per day in 2011. So with a general image of the regional transportation emission inventory, we would like to refine our estimation as we notice that there are many sources of uncertainties in the existing emission estimation tools. So for example, if you are driving, no matter you are driving a compact or a sports or a luxury car, you will be assigned the exactly same emission factor. And for the same vehicle, different people drive it differently. And moreover, for the same person driving the same vehicle, year-to-year fuel supply change leads to various upstream emissions. So maybe 1 year, your fuel comes from the Middle East, but for the next year, your fuel might come from further away, from Norway and from other countries. So all of these, it all leads to like different emission factors, and they all contribute to a great amount of uncertainty in our emission inventory estimation. And the effects, eventually the policy making related to dependent on these emission inventory estimation. Moreover, when the environmental and climate change issues are involved in politics, you can imagine that you can never be 100% objective to your data and methods. So in the political system, like the US, it is hard to assure the methodological and result consistency in emission accounting from administration to administration, from government agencies to government agencies, and from state to state. So the question here is there, like, as an academic, how can we minimize the uncertainty in climate policy making? Is reporting one single number of emission inventory really enough and sufficient to make robust climate-related policies? If you recall this, flow chart, that how we calculate the emission inventory for the Greater Toronto Area in a deterministic way, we can find that a way to mitigate policymaking uncertainty is to consider as many sources of uncertainties as possible in emission modeling. So therefore, we move away from we built on this deterministic modeling approach as shown in this flowchart to a statistic one. So in the improved emission model, so each upstream and operation emission factors for conventionally fueled and electric vehicles are associated with with the distribution rather than a deterministic value, such as one of the most important is the upstream emission factor of conventionally fueled vehicles, which is mainly due to the global oil price changes, which leads to very different year-to-year crude oil supply share, and thus different emission factors. Even though Canada, like where we conduct this study, in Canada, it's a very resource-rich country, this effect is quite apparent. One year, there's more oil from Saudi Arabia, and the next year maybe more oil from Venezuela. And 1 year there's oil from the US as well. And sometimes there's more local crude oil supply. So the upstream of the electric vehicle is mainly dependent on the yearly power production and temporal supply uncertainty. Consider the local electricity generation mix. The sources of electricity generation is quite stable in this case. Also, the operating emission factor of conventional vehicles is dependent on the link level drive cycle and fleet composition uncertainty, which considers people's distinct driving behavior one from another, and the spatial heterogeneity in car ownership. So most an example for this can be in the suburban areas, people might fancy bigger pickup trucks and SUVs, and in the urban areas, people might fancy smaller vehicles and compact vehicles. So it is reasonable to assume that these emission factors contributes are independently distributed, so that we can apply the Monte Carlo simulation to draw values from these distributions and generate the final emission inventory distribution. It is worth noting that for this study, the scope is to examine to only examine the emission factor distributions and changes so that our travel activity still stayed deterministic. So we picked two base years for this study in 2011 and 2017 to run our simulation for fuel cycle emission calculation. So as in between the two base years, so Ontario government got rid of all coal-fired power plants. So basically, if you can take away this, like in 2011, there's still a bunch of coal-fired power plant in operation, and in 2017, all coal-fired power plant are phased out. We can see there's a large overlap area in the left figure, which shows the base case emission inventory and the 2011 and 2017. So it is hard to tell the reduction in emissions caused by engine technology improvement if there were no full emission distribution exhibited. So while for the 100% electric vehicle scenario, you can see the reduction is apparent. This is mainly because the phase out of the coal-fired power plant, and you can see the overlapped area. So the reduction in so the effect of coal-fired power plants is quite apparent. Then we transfer the previous two figures to the same scale using the box plots. So the leftmost two boxes are the figure in the previous slide on the left, and the rightmost two box plots are the figure in the previous slide on the right. So x-axis shows 5 scenarios we made by mixing electric vehicle fleet to the base case, and the y-axis is the well-to-wheel emission inventory. So in the middle, there are several bounding scenarios of different electric vehicle penetration rates, just to give you an idea about what might happen if we introduce this much of electric vehicles into our current fleet. So when, as you can see, when the electric penetration is low, as in the green box, there are significant overlapping areas between scenarios. Specifically, if we look at the two boxes I linked here, both denotes well-to-wheel emission inventory in 2017, but for two scenarios. One is the base case, and one is 25% electric vehicle introduction. So for a pro-climate change government agency, they make estimations on top. So that they can show there might be a bigger effect of electric vehicles. But for a anti-climate change government agency like the Trump administration, they might just show you that these two distributions, they are very similar. So there is not much reduction, not much carbon reduction can be introduced by electric vehicle introduction. So another reflection on this could be when the electric vehicle penetration is low, we can reach the same level of greenhouse gas reduction by reducing congestion and improving driving cycle, like basically change how people drive. But when the electric vehicle penetration is high, the emission effects of congestion and drive cycle is minimized. You can see there's much less uncertainty in the carbon emission estimation, and we can reach a deep greenhouse gas reduction by electrifying the fleet more. Of course, this study is done in the Ontario context, where you have to note that the Ontario electricity grid is extremely clean compared to Hong Kong or even China's power grid. We further conducted a sensitive analysis for study year 2011 and 2017. So we found that tank-to-wheel is the operating emission. Its uncertainty dominates other sources of uncertainty. But there is less uncertainty in tank-to-wheel emission factors. So finishing our first study, the implications you can take away is that electric vehicle greenhouse gas reduction relies mainly on the power grid, which is a governmental effort. And the conventional vehicle greenhouse gas reduction relies mainly on drive cycle and vehicle upgrade, which is mainly the individual choice. And also the consideration of uncertainty in modeling can reduce the uncertainty in policy appraisals, especially if you need multi-agency collaboration. To dive in further, what like impact and what policies we can make out of these emission inventories? Why do we need to make accurate and robust emission inventory estimations? One example I'm going to show you here. So the Biden administration, they put a lot of efforts on promoting the equity when people make when the authorities making climate change related investment and policies. The promote that federal agencies work with states and local communities to deliver at least 40% of the overall benefits from federal investments in climate and clean energy to disadvantaged communities. At the current iteration rate of cleaner vehicle technology, it is extremely difficult actually to reach net zero without a paradigm shift in mobility choice. So of course, I'm mentioning this again in the North American context. Everyone likes to drive, and everyone likes to drive, and everyone has to drive. So as we just concluded that conventional vehicle greenhouse gas reduction relies mainly on individual efforts. So whether people would like to own newer vehicles, whether they can afford it, whether they are willing to transfer to electric vehicles, whether they would like to switch to other mobility modes. So these personal preferences are highly correlated with social economic characteristics. So therefore, we are curious about how socioeconomic characteristics can lead to different mobility patterns and thus different mobility-related emission profiles. So this is important for equitable decarbonization in the transportation system, as mobility and accessibility are key to job opportunities, educational resources, and the healthcare, etc. So what we use is utilize the same emission modeling approach as in the deterministic study. And the figure on the left summarizes the average per capita mobility greenhouse gas emissions by dissemination area. So dissemination area is the finest geospatial unit in the national census. So national census data were used to match the social economic characteristics to each household. We can see that dissemination areas close to the city center have much lower per capita mobility carbon footprint due to mixed land use, better public transit, and active transportation infrastructure. And on the right is the mobility greenhouse gas emission intensity by municipality. So similarly, Toronto in the middle, as the hub of the area, has the lowest greenhouse gas emission intensity. It has the most, also has the most occupational, educational, healthcare, and the recreational opportunities. People from across the region, they travel to the city to get access to these. So here we show a Lorentz curve for individual transportation carbon emissions. So it is used to calculate like the Gini coefficients, which is you should always hear this from the economic news. It is a common measure in economic studies to evaluate the inequality in people's income. But here we substitute the concept of greenhouse gas emissions for income. Basically, the axis shows the percentile of the population, which is ranked by their personal transportation carbon footprint. And on the y-axis, it shows the greenhouse gas emission for each person. And the Gini coefficients in the whole GTA, in the whole area, the Greater Toronto area, is 0.55, and it is the highest in city centers and the lowest in suburbs. This does not mean that in the suburbs, this means that in can be explained by that, like the people in suburbs, they have less mobility choices. Most of them, they just travel by car, so that have like more or less uniform greenhouse gas emissions. And also people in city centers, they have more choice, more mobility modes, and more choices to take different travel modes, and also travel different distances, so they have a much higher Gini coefficient. One thing I would like to highlight here is the top 30% of the emitters emit 70% of all transport-related carbon emissions, and the bottom 50% of the emitters only emit 10% of the greenhouse gas emissions of all transport-related carbon emissions. It would be much effective to target in this case, it would be much effective to target the top 30% of the gross emitters if we want to reach an effective decarbonization. We further associate neighborhood level socioeconomic features with average mobility greenhouse gas emissions per capita per day. So the figures show violin plots of average daily mobility greenhouse gas emissions on the y-axis for different socioeconomic features in quintiles on the x-axis. See here, you can see the median income quintile from the lowest to highest, and average family size from lowest to highest, and also number of trips from lowest to highest. We can see that higher the median income, if you have a bigger family size and more trips you make today, it all leads to higher mobility greenhouse gas emissions. Higher housing instability, such as you rent rather than you own a place, and higher material deprivation, such as you do not have the ability to afford basic living needs, it all lead to much lower greenhouse gas emissions. It is quite an obvious trend in the Greater Toronto area. We further look at the satellite image of neighborhoods to find if we can see anything that is apparent just from pictures and photos or satellite image to try to estimate the level of mobility greenhouse gas emissions. This is especially useful for urban planning practices as an indicator for carbon neutral or environmentally friendly neighborhood design. It is apparent that from the left to right, we have a decreasing trend for mobility-related carbon emissions. As you can see here, from left to right, there's also a higher level of land use mixture and population density. These visual features can serve as an important indicator when we try to estimate mobility-related carbon emissions. We also use the transportation emission inventory as an input for regional chemical transport model. So by tuning the emission reduction from multiple scenarios, there are mainly 3 different scenarios we tested. It's about a household electric vehicle adoption, electrifying transit, and also cleaner trucks, like basically cleaner freight transportation. And using a chemical transport model to include both natural emission sources and other anthropogenic emission sources, we are able to quantify the social cost and public health benefits from the air pollution reduction and as well as the carbon emission reduction. So using the estimated pollution concentrations in different scenarios, we leverage the relative risk function in public health studies to calculate the attributable premature deaths and attributable year life lost. That is to calculate the public health impacts for each clean transportation scenario and compare their effectiveness for both decarbonization and public health benefits perspectives. Furthermore, the public health benefits in the form of attributable premature death can be converted to monetary values in Canadian dollars in our case. So here we show some results. The brown bar indicates the results for household passenger vehicles, and the green bar indicates the commercial vehicles. So on the left, we show the social cost attributable on the y-axis for all GTA boroughs, like Greater Toronto boroughs, and on the right, the decarbonization effects. So we attribute all of these effects to 3 fleets. From top to bottom, it's the transit buses, private passenger vehicles, household passenger vehicles, and the commercial vehicles. So the results demonstrate that while the private vehicle electrification is the most effective in reducing the greenhouse gas emissions, having cleaner commercial vehicles, as you can see this blue bar, is the most beneficial to reduce public health burden. We would like to further analyze the spatial distribution of the health benefits in years of life saved in different clean transportation scenarios. As you can see, in mostly all of these scenarios, people alongside several highways, there are most benefits. Second by people that live in the city center. When we contrast the mobility greenhouse gas emissions with the air pollution reduction and social benefits that from these reductions, we observe that the areas with the lowest per capita greenhouse gas emissions suffer the most severe PM 2.5 concentrations. It demonstrates a huge disparity between the communities and social groups in terms of mobility greenhouse gas emissions. And we have to admit that sometimes people live close to all types of facilities that when they enjoy the benefits of being living in the proximity to these areas and enjoying the convenience to occupational, educational, and healthcare opportunities, they are also suffering worse air quality. However, there are a significant amount of socially disadvantaged groups that have no choice but to live in the places with worse area. One example here is this area I'm circling here. It's close to the airport, and the community there are mostly Indian immigrants. A few implications that we can take away from these 2 studies is that a sustainable transportation system should be an inclusive one and considers the benefits for all people. And also sustainable transportation should consider the double burden of higher air pollution exposure and the less mobility choices among marginalized communities especially. So there are a few research that I'm currently doing and I would like to pursue in my future studies. So first, of course, to work on the sustainable transition of a metropolitan multimodal transportation system. I'm especially interested in developing a universal and comprehensive carbon emission counting framework for the system to evaluate the impacts of ongoing changes in urban transportation, such as vehicle electrification, automation, and shared mobility. And also, I'm very interested in extend my study scope from the transportation system to the entire urban system by creating a data-rich urban environment to advance smart city and healthy city initiatives. This is mainly done by, as I've said, like using mobile environmental sensing, which is like research topic I'm currently pursuing. To do this, we want mainly to promote the concept of the One Health Initiative, which is the collaborative, multi-sectoral, and transdisciplinary efforts to achieve optimal health outcomes, recognizing the interconnection between people, animals, plants, and their shared environment. One onset of the study I would like to do is that the quantification of co-benefits of citywide decarbonization with a focus on air quality, built environment, and the land use, similar to the study I have just introduced. So wise man once said that with greater power comes greater responsibility, as environmental justice and the social equity serve as an essential pillar in achieving a sustainable urban development. I would like to pursue them as also as a topic of my future studies, especially from a quantitative and modeling perspective, which is very important to achieve policy making process and to achieve equitable outcomes. And thank you all very much for your attention, and I'm very happy to take in any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wang. We will now proceed to the Q&A section. Please feel free to leave a message to the chat room if you have any question regarding the webinar. So we'll now have the first question from Mr. Lam. Hydrogen-driven vehicles are considered to be more sustainable than electric vehicles. To what extent it is promising to promote the use of hydrogen-driven vehicles in coming years?
Yeah, thank you for your question. I know this is a very controversial topic because personally I have not looked into like the hydrogen powered vehicles a lot, but I'm just going to share a few of my personal views just to provoke some of the discussion and to inspire like the more meaningful answers. So what I'm thinking is that it really depends on the like the region or the country who would like to adopt hydrogen or electricity, because in the context of Ontario or some parts of Canada, their electricity generation is much more cleaner than their hydrogen production. Most of their hydrogen comes from what they call the gray hydrogen, which are not very clean. They are a byproduct of the fossil fuel and a byproduct of oil refinery or natural gas or produced by natural gas. But in turn, their electricity generation is much more cleaner, mostly from hydrogen and mostly from hydropower and also from nuclear. So in their case, it's definitely they're more like the intent to develop more electric vehicles rather than hydrogen vehicles. But for some other places, maybe for Hong Kong, because I know like the major power source for Hong Kong is coal and natural gas. Yeah, it might be viable to promote hydrogen fueled vehicles in the context of Hong Kong. So when we talk about this, we really need to take into consideration, first of all, the regional specific context and also the life cycle perspective.
Any more questions?
I think someone has raised a hand. Can you turn on your mic and share your question, please? You're muted. Can you unmute yourself? Or
Asked to unmute, but I've given him permission to talk, but he's mute. So if we have no more questions, we're going to end today's webinar.
yeah, if
Thank
you don't get a chance to talk, you can always send me an email. I will be happy to answer your questions or to discuss to discuss future
yes,
possible
okay.
collaborations and stuff. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wang, as the speaker of today's webinar. We have prepared carbon credit certificates for you as a token of thanks. I'm sure all of us have learned a lot tonight and hope you enjoyed the webinar. The digital attendance certificates will be sent to your email in 4 weeks. Once
Awesome.
again, thank you very much for
Yeah, thank you.
joining the webinar, and we wish you all a good evening. See you all again in the future events. Goodbye.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you all.